have been mapped by now, and even more so now with Google Maps. You know what I mean? Everything is mapped. You know, you can look at your house and see your car sitting in front of it on the Google map, which is kind of scary, but you can. And so our position was, how can we do this? And so we brought everybody into the Oakland area. And when Bobby Seale and I ran for office, we took maybe 40-some% of the vote the first time. When I ran the second time by myself, I took 49% of the vote. So what did that mean? That meant that we had half the voting population was in our corner. And that gave us a base of power in terms of that. And so through a variety of machinations, we were able to then determine that we could put another person in as the mayor. And what our goal was to seize control of the Port of Oakland. Now you could seize control with guns, which wasn't going to happen since the Oakland PD probably had more guns than we did, not to count the state police, not to count the National Guard, not to count the United States Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, the SEALs or whatever else, the Coast Guard, the CIA, the FBI, the ATF. This is an armed country. Okay, so we knew we were not going to be able to seize territory and hold it. And I say that because people don't, they want to talk that swashbuckling talk about, well, let's do this and let's do that. Well, I always ask them now, I asked Saddam Hussein about somebody with an army and some guns and what happens when you come up against a nuclear force that's not going to play with you. This country is not a joke. It's an imperial force with a lot of guns and all the nuclear weapons in the world. Nobody else. Does Iran have one nuclear? So what are you talking about? You got 98% of the nuclear, and what you don't have, you've sold off to your friends or given to your friends. So in the case of the Black Panther Party, so we concentrated everything there in Oakland. We said we're going to elect a mayor. We're going to get someone there that's our mayor. It wasn't a member of the party. It was sort of what we call our Sun Yat-sen, those of you who know the history of China. And so we said, well, we'll put this one guy in. We'll take over the port board, we'll do all these other things, and then we'll have this base for revolution. The problem is that everybody doesn't make the shift from point A to point B, and a lot of the people who were in the party, and even now when I talk to some of them, they had no understanding of where we were going, and people were still talking about off the peg. Well, that's all right, but we really weren't talking about ourselves going up against the police forces of the United States and our little puny guns. We had a lot of guns for a black organization of any time, but we didn't have enough guns to go against what I just mentioned. So the way to deal with this was like that, and many people couldn't make that transition. We had a school now. We had money coming in from a variety of sources. We didn't have to go on the street all the time and beg, and so there was an inability on some people's part to grow and to develop, and so people began to do really destructive stuff. And so part of what I think happened was that there was also some chauvinism in there, which is why I left the Black Panther Party. People say, well, was the party members chauvinistic? I mean, where is there a country that is not patriarchal? That would be nowhere. So, where were we going to get Black Panther members from? The sky, revolutionary heaven. So yeah, I mean, the men, some of the men resented women in leadership. Some of them certainly resented me in leadership, and but many of them didn't. And so and so it was like that. But there was a breakdown in that area also. So a variety of things happened, and I think that, listen, women do work every day. Women are workers and do a lot of things. We don't have big swashbuckling things that we do. We can do that day-to-day work. And I realize that may sound like, well, we've all worked it out, but there is a difference between men and women, outside of the obvious differences. And whether it's acculturated or whether it's, conditioning or whether it's genetic or whatever, that's another conversation. But the bottom line is that women do very good administrative work. And so I put women in charge of just about everything in the party, except for the security, And but that's what you needed the men for. But it got to a point where the equality was too much, and some of the men were very, very, very rough and violent. And so I think that certainly was another contributing factor. But the biggest factor was the fact that the United States had figured out that it could use propaganda. For example, we don't even know people are getting killed in Iraq right now. We just we don't even know there's really a war going on. You know, if you think about it, that's why we're not talking about it, because we don't even realize it's going on. And so the propaganda machine has become different. And so a lot of different things changed it, and I think that that happened. I don't think there needs to be a Black Panther Party again, but I do think there needs to be some organized effort on the part of people to fight for this. And yes, the lessons of the party, things that we did were good, and the things that we did that were bad, and the failures have to be accounted for. And we who were truly true members of the party, we don't have any fear about that. You know, we don't have any problems talking about Huey Newton ultimately becoming a cokehead, even though I didn't see it. I mean, I saw him snorting cocaine, but it didn't occur to me that he was addicted. You know, how ridiculous was that statement, but truly it didn't. And so there are things like that to be watched for and examined, and hopefully we can create a kind of institute, which some of us are trying to do right now, where people can study the Black Panther Party history, because it is an important history, because it's the last really major effort by blacks, particularly a revolutionary organization in America. You know. Yes, I'm sorry.
You talked a lot about the Black Panthers, and there was a reference made to April Brown. Can you talk a little bit about the current Black Panthers that are incarcerated, and more importantly, Elaine Fitzgerald, because I know that you're working on the Elaine Fitzgerald campaign with the Brown Berets in Washington. I'm with the Anarchist Black Caucus, and we work with the Brown Berets.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Oh, you did. That's good. Yeah. Well, Chip Fitzgerald, I'm going to see him on Friday. I don't know what to say. I haven't seen him literally in 40 years. It's hard to imagine somebody being in prison for 40 years, isn't it? But this brother was shot in the head in an incident in LA. The LAPD was so, you know, people would, in the Black Panther Party, we would say the LAPD was so rough, you know, people would say, well, a pig is a pig. That's how we call the police. They say a pig is a pig, you know, it's a pig. If it's Chicago, if it's San Francisco, what's the difference? We'd say, come on to LA and you're going to see there's a little bit of a difference. And so it got so bad in LA that people would say that if you had violated some rule of the party, your punishment would be to be sent to LA. That would be the punishment. It was just that. But every day we suffered, every day. And 1969 was the absolute worst year of all, because J. Edgar Hoover had just issued a statement saying that the Black Panther Party was the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States, meaning that we were a terrorist organization, and that we had to be eliminated. He said he was not planning on our surviving 1969. He issued that edict and that statement in 1968. And so he said he wasn't surprised, he didn't expect us didn't intend for us to be around by the end of 1969, and they put it on us from the beginning. In January of '69, two of our comrades, Bunchy Carter and John Huggins, were killed. And by December of '69, we had the killings of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark in Chicago, and we had the raid on our office in LA by what was now known as the SWAT team. This didn't exist before. The LAPD started the SWAT team. And as a matter of fact, on their insignia, they have part of their symbol, they have the number 41, because it was 41st and Central where they first raided the Black Panther Party office. They put several hundred SWAT team members, and they were originally called an Urban Counterinsurgency Force, combat boots and the whole piece. Now, LAPD started this just for the Black Panther Party. Now, you have to know they will tell you that. This is not the old Black Panther conspiracy theorists talking. This is what they will tell you. And in that milieu, and in that mix of between January and December of '69, every single day, all of us were constantly being arrested. In the case of Chip Fitzgerald, he was involved in a shootout with the police. This is stuff you've got to know. I mean, we had an order that, you were not to give up your gun. That's it. If you were stopped, you had a problem. If you had a gun, if your door was, if the police came to your door, you were supposed to defend your door. Now that was hard sometimes and scary, because I remember in November, before the main raid, when the police surrounded our building, they put the first sharpshooters. That's when we saw this first vision of this team. We didn't know what it was. We're looking at up sharpshooters on the rooftops and everything. People looking at, talking about they're towing the cars off the street, and moving people out of the buildings in the area, and they're getting ready to make an assault on us. I mean, it's scary, and we were all pretty afraid. So in the case of Chip Fitzgerald, he and two other people were involved in a shootout from a car running through a neighborhood, something right out of television, and he was shot. and eventually